Hi, so my name is Venice, and for my final presentation, I'm going to be talking about domestic abuse cases against men. And the purpose for my research, so I was interested in domestic violence before this because my major is social work and I want to possibly have a career dealing with domestic violence cases. So I just wanted to learn more about the domestic violence against men because they aren't really heard of that often, and I just wanted to know why or what the reasons were behind like the low number of men reporting it. And I just wanted to also know how domestic violence differs from men to women, like how are they affected differently. So, what is domestic abuse? Domestic abuse can also be known as intimate partner violence. It is a pattern of coercive, controlling behaviors in an intimate relationship that can sometimes be life-threatening. Domestic abuse can affect anyone regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, religion, and basically anything. It doesn't matter. Domestic abuse can affect anyone. Domestic violence can happen in many ways. It can be emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. This can happen in heterosexual and same-sex relationships. In violent relationships, there's always an imbalance of power and control, so that usually means that one partner holds the power and control over another. They usually use hurtful words or actions to be able to control their partner and the relationship. So I put in this power and control wheel, which is used to explain the different ways that an abusive partner can use power and control to manipulate the partner in a relationship. So the wheel is made for women victims, but it doesn't mean that men are not affected in the same ways. So it says using intimidation, making her afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying her property, abusing pets, displaying weapons, using emotional abuse, putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, calling her names, making her think she's crazy, playing mind games, humiliating her, making her feel guilty, using isolation, controlling what she does, who she sees and talks to, what she reads, where she goes, limiting her outside involvement, minimizing, denying, and blaming, making light of the abuse and not taking her concerns seriously, saying the abuse doesn't happen, shifting responsibility for abusive behavior, saying she caused it, using children, making her feel guilty about the children, using the children to relay messages, threatening to take the children away, using male privilege, treating her like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being the one to define men's and women's roles, using economic abuse, preventing her from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money, giving her an allowance, taking her money, not letting her know about or have access to family income, and using coercion and threats, making and or carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, threatening to leave her, to commit suicide, to report her to welfare, making her drop charges, making her do illegal things. So this power and control wheel basically defines how or what actions and verbal abuse is used in domestic abuse cases. So, domestic abuse against men. So, about 830,000 men are victims of domestic violence every year, and this number was based off a survey. So, this number in reality could be higher, but since not all men report the violence, um, it could be low. It could be stated as lower, as well as the 1.5 million women who are victims each year. Again, this number could be lower than it actually is. Um, so in the US, there are about 4,000 domestic violence programs, but very few of them provide support to men. So there can be a lot of programs, resources, support guided more to help women. And not a lot of the resources or support is guided to help men in domestic violence cases. So here are some myths as to why men don't report the abuse. So I have men can't be victims of abuse, and this basically says uses masculinity as a way to deny it, saying that men can't be victims because they're supposed to be tough and the women are the weak ones. Another myth I have is men are perpetrators of violence, not the victims. So again, it's using that toxic masculinity to say like men are the ones who are violent and not the victims. And then the last myth I have is domestic violence resources are only for women. So again, there are a lot of resources. They are guided towards women, but there are also limited resources for men. And even if they are for women, I feel like they won't deny the support or resources. So there is a difference between domestic violence between men and women. Men are more likely to be embarrassed about their abuse, drawing away from help and reporting the abuse. So they don't want to report it because it doesn't like view them as masculine. And then women who are abused are more likely to be pushed, beaten up, threatened with a gun. So women who are victims are more likely to be physically abused, like pushed, shoved, hit, and stuff like that. While women who abuse will throw objects, kick, bite, hit with an object, threaten with a knife. They will use other items to help with the abuse. So then women who abuse will also try to use a system to their advantage. So if a case does go to court, women will sometimes act as the victim to make the man seem like the abuser, and it can be flipped on him, and then he doesn't get the justice that he needs, and the woman just gets away with it. So signs of an abusive relationship. These it says incidents of physical abuse don't seem that bad. So kind of like when you're hit one time, it's not that bad, or you're just like verbally abused but not physical, so it's you don't consider it as bad as it could be. Or you compare it to like commercial scenes or movie scenes where they have it way worse, and you don't believe that it's as bad, so you don't report it. But it is a sign of abuse. Um, the abuse has only occurred once or twice. If it occurs once or twice, it will most likely happen third, fourth, fifth time. It will keep happening, so that is abuse. It isn't physical, but it is still verbal and emotionally abusive. So again, like they don't hit you, but they like it's kind of like the power and control wheel where they verbally talk down to you. That is still considered abuse. It's them having the power. Your partner belittles you, yelling, criticizing you. They make you feel like less of a person. Again, not physically, but emotionally, verbally. Your partner has violent behavior and threatens you. Even if it's a threat, it's still abusive. Even if they're violent but not towards you, it's still abusive. It's still a form of harming you. You feel controlled, partner's possessive, like they try to control you, what you do, where you go, who you see, and things like that. That is signs of an abusive relationship. So how can men get help? There is a domestic abuse helpline for men. There's only one in the nation that specifically helps men. That doesn't mean that other helplines won't help men. It just means that there is one that is specifically guided to help, support, have resources for men. Another way to help is to believe men when they report it, not judging or criticizing. Men are more likely to report if they don't feel judged. If someone feels judged, they will most likely not report it if it happens again. And then unlearning toxic masculinity. The quote, being a man does not mean staying in a dangerous situation. Being a man does not mean you can't possibly be a victim of abuse. Men who are strong and capable can sometimes find themselves in these situations. Being a man doesn't mean you are immune to domestic violence. So again, no one is safe or immune to domestic violence. It can happen to anybody, and people deserve to get the help that they need. And these are my sources.